Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Rock-Midrock Crisis. I'm your host, East Coast Pete. This is the show that tries to save rock. Today we're going to talk about the Police. London Rockers in 1977. Sting on bass, singer-songwriter Andy Summers on guitar, and of course Stuart Copeland on drums. Power trios were made defunct by punk. Prog bands were adding on the more the merrier, so how did the Police become the world's biggest band? The so-called Second British Invasion until glam and disco superseded. Roughly from 1982 to 1986, artists Elvis Costello, Dire Straits, Gary Newman, Peter Gabriel, The Pretenders, Squeeze, Joe Jackson, The Buggles, Billy Idol, Soft Cell, Duran Duran, David Palmer, Flock of Seagulls, Bananarama, Culture Club, the Eurythmics, and the Police all fell into this subgenre. Police were together for only 9 years, plus a brief reunion in 2007. Their debut album, Outlandos d'Amour, reached number 6 in the UK. Their second album, Regatta de Blanc, in 1979 was the first of 4 number 1 studio albums. The single Message in a Bottle was their first number 1 hit. Police mixed rock with jazz, punk, and reggae. They were called synth pop and new wave, but that was not enough of a description. Next hit, Don't Stand So Close to Me, was Sting remembering his employment as a teacher before he was a rocker. Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic showed unbridled energy and mirth. The final studio album, Synchronicity, was number 1 in the UK and the US. Every Breath You Take made the band a worldwide phenomenon. The Police have sold over 75 million albums, and they've taken 6 Grammys. They were elected to the Hall of Fame in 2003. Stuart Copeland had played drums for Curved Air, but so much of their music was classical, he couldn't cut loose as much as he would have liked. We met Sting, who may have still been Gordon at that time since he was employed as a school teacher. Mr. Sting, I forgot my homework and the dog ate it. The man who would be Sting was keen to form a band, one that would fit in with London's new punk scene. Scott Summers had played guitar in Strontium. He'd also played with Eric Burdon and the Animals. He was 10 years older than Sting or Copeland. At first, his age was seen as a problem since there were no 30-somethings as yet. After they got down to business, the point was moot since they all sounded too good to be punk. But they did portray an attitude of angst, not comfortable as just another Brit pub band. Sting started singing with an exotic Caribbean affectation. His slurred high tenor set the band apart, as did their bleached locks, which were left over from a shoot of a chewing gum commercial. Their first album was unmarked, as they had no label. Sting's brother Miles put up £1,500 to pay the studio and the pressing plant. They also had no manager, but Miles liked the song Roxanne. He lobbied and got a deal with A&M. Roxanne never got to put out the red light at first because the radio execs were all saying, "Is this a song about prostitution?" A&M decided to promote the single by putting up flyers stating that the single was banned by the BBC, even though it never was. The second single actually was banned by the BBC, not for salacious content, but for a questionable sleeve art. Can't Stand Losing You had a picture of Stu Copeland hanging over an ice block that was being melted by a radio. Or was it a radiator? Anyway, BBC said, "We can't have people dangling over an ice block on our records, radiator or not." What would people say? The single was a moderate success, going to number 42 in the UK. Meanwhile, Roxanne was charting in Canada and the US, two countries who could appreciate a good prostitute song. And police were on a shoestring budget, driving them from gig to gig in a Ford van. Don't tell me they have no punk credentials. They played in a packed house at CBGB's down in New York's Bowery, a place accustomed to seeing police in the neighborhood. The next single, Message in a Bottle, was number 1 in the UK. Apparently the sleeve art was more palatable. Similarly, Walking on the Moon was number 1, and the album Regatta de Blanc was number 25 in the US. Songs that failed to chart at first made high numbers upon release, perhaps due to the expanded police presence. They went over on a world tour to kick off the decade. Mexico, Taiwan, India, Egypt, Greece, and Hong Kong. And a documentary film was made. It was titled Police Around the World. The third album was mostly recorded in Holland. The burgeoning netter pop scene made for excellent studios at reasonable prices. Sting's Don't Stand So Close to Me was about a handsome young teacher encountering but not fulfilling temptation in the classroom. The Police are not known for their wholesome subject matter. Zenyatta Mondatta received critical praise even though the album's name meant nothing in any human language. The sleeve art was inoffensive as the first two albums, a triangle of blonde heads and a giant headline. Too much invested to take chances with the censors. The album won 2 Grammys, and the band had everything: good looks, interesting lyrics, monstrous drums. Sting would sometimes play slower numbers with a classical contrabass. Andy Summers was melodic and not given to long solos. It was a bare bones band, but the bones were structurally sound. The fourth album, recorded in the Caribbean on Montserrat, Spirits in the Material World and Every Little Thing She Does in Magic were in the lineup. Sting and Summers would be tax exiles, but Copeland would stay in England because he is an American. No tax problems there. That's socialism. During the break, Sting tried acting. He was a face in the Who's. During the break, let me start over. During the break, Sting tried acting. He was Ace Face in the Who's Quadrophenia, and he was in a TV play called Brimstone and Treacle. Sounds hellish. In 1983, he played a starring role in the movie Dune as Paul Atreides' evil Harkonnen nemesis, Feyd-Rautha. The movie proved too dense to be a hit, but Sting was great. Boy, that guy could stare. Final album, Synchronicity, would be a smash hit. But the more Sting's star rose, the more his relationship with the Police dissipated. Singles were Every Breath You Take, Wrapped Around Your Finger, King of Pain, and the title track were all hits. Critics called the Police 911? No. The biggest band on the planet, but they all recorded their parts separately. The tour was successful. One leg of it had 70,000 fans at Shea Stadium. Sting felt that they couldn't do much more than that. In 1984, the Police would put in their papers. The album was #1 in the US and second only to Michael Jackson's Thriller for a Grammy. Sting went solo. It would take 4 years to reestablish himself as a jazz man. I saw him play at the Meadowlands in Jersey. He sounded weak around the crowd, was waiting for the Grateful Dead. Sting got stung, but to his credit, he did not go disco. His sound was now comparable to post-Traffic Steve Winwood. That should have been a tour, Police and Traffic. Pete. Copeland and Summers would have success producing and playing with Robert Fripp. The Police would reunite for a farewell tour in 2007. Sting's sophisticated jazz appealed to an audience more intimate that he had known. Just don't stand so close to him. I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about the Police's first album, because it actually tries to be punk. Outlandos D'Amour, the guitar, is too good for punk, though. Sting wanted it to be punk, and he sings it like a punk. It's punk light. So Lonely. A Jamaican? Not reggae, not really. Unnecessary guitar solo and 3 harmonica notes tacked on at the end of the third verse. And Roxanne is the best cut. Remember hearing that on the radio? No one knew what the fuck, Hole in My Life, slick, jazzy, no punks here. Can't Stand Losing You, twice as good as anything else so far. The second album, Regatta de Blanc, the message in the bottle is kind of, it's alright. It's weak pop. Bring on the Night, shame. Bo Diddley, The Attempt Falls Without Your Okay Lump in My Throat, bass heavy lyric light. Does everyone stare the way I do when I stare at you? No Time This Time, Stuart Copeland, Quick Steps. Zenyatta Monada, Don't Stand So Close to Me, catchy pedophilia song? Just like the old man in that book by Nabokov. Driven to Tears is nice. They never follow trends. When the world is running down, you make the best of what's still around. Their best lesser-known song, Canary in a Coal Mine. This album's much better. Lyrically, Voices Inside My Head, Bombs Away, But We're Okay. Dee-doo-doo-doo, dee-da-da-da, that's all I want to say to you. Behind My Camel, this one's a tosser. Man in a Suitcase, Shadows in the Rain. The Other Way of Stopping, 4 songs no one cares about. Ghost in the Machine album. spirits in the material world. It was a laid-back hit. Every little thing she does is magic. The love song seems kind of out of place here. Invisible Sun, fun, somber, Sting abandons his accent. Hunger for You, filler, Demolition Man, forgettable. Too much information, too much time to fill on this album. Rehumanize Yourself is flat out awful. One World, Not Three tries to be political. Omega Man. I don't think this is the Dustin Hoffman movie soundtrack. Secret Journey, Holiness and Loneliness and Darkness. And if you saw the illustration on the cover of this album, it had the three guys in a sort of a caricature made by a digital clock kind of look. Each little segment made up their faces. It's kind of strange. People didn't know what quite to make. LED Police. But Darkness, life was easy when it was boring. Too true, Synchronicity. Tea in the Sahara, Every Breath You Take. This was their last hit. These guys don't like each other. They don't. Synchronicity 2. I like this one too. It means something is happening at the same time. Something else is happening. Synchronicity, something happening at the same time that something else is happening. Yeah, I like that. Walking in Your Footsteps, Mr. Dinosaur. Oh my God. Nothing Song, Mother, Another, Miss Gradenko, Classroom Revisited, King of Pain, There's a Little Black Spot on the Sun Today, etc., 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 Wrapped Around Your Finger. I think this album is a disappointment for the most part. Murder by the Numbers. Adios, Sting. Sting's dream of the blue sea turtles is really just not very wonderful. But Police were a huge success. They sold a whole lot of albums, had a lot of fans. They came up with some original music. Not that much of it, not really that much at all. 5 albums worth. And certainly Sting's members have gone on to their own type of success. Glad to say that and see that, and more fuel for the fire for a Sting reunion party. Just don't call the police. Thanks everybody. See you next time on Rock-Midrock Crisis.